2021 was a strange year for all of us, I think. And hopefully you, like me, found some comfort in books and retreated there and got to enjoy traveling to places that we weren't able to physically. Hey everybody, welcome back to It's Too Late to Apologize Book Reviews. I'm Stella, and today we're going to do a 2021 year-end reading review. Now, I've never done one of these before, so I'm going to do my best to not blather on too long, but 2021, I read 40 books, which is pretty good for me. 40 books is always my goal to read every year, and this year I was able to meet my goal, and I'm really happy about that. So today I'm going to go over the top 10 books that I read this year. 2021 was a strange year for all of us, I think. And hopefully you, like me, found some comfort in books and retreated there and got to enjoy traveling to places that we weren't able to physically. So let's get into it. So this year covered a few challenges for me. I had started a challenge for myself to read all of Jane Austen's works. I got about halfway through years ago and then just kind of stopped for some strange reason. So this year I was able to finish off Jane Austen's works. And also I have this ongoing Shakespeare project that I've been picking away at that I started about halfway through the year. And it was really to get myself to read all of Shakespeare's works because I'd really only read 3 of his works in high school, basically, which would have been Romeo and Juliet, Othello, and Twelfth Night. Those were the 3 that I had read. I was not satisfied with that. So I read 10 Shakespeare plays this year, which was great. And I'm going to continue my Shakespeare project into next year. So there's still a few reviews that I need to get done for finishing up my 2021 reading. One of those is going to be Moby Dick, and the other is going to be The Goldfinch by Donna's Hart. So those are coming. So what we're going to start with before we get into the top 10 are a few honorable mentions that were really great, but didn't quite make it into the top 10. So in no particular order, about 5 of the 10 Shakespeare plays that I did end up reading this year. I have been collecting these editions from Penguin, the new prints of these editions. And I quite like the cover design, and they're set up as different colors for the different genres of Shakespeare's plays. So we have the light blue for what's considered the romances and comedies. And then they also come in these purple covers for the histories. The sonnets come in this light yellow. And then the tragedies come in black. So they do have, for anybody who is interested, the formatting is quite good. There's a lot of space in the margins if you do want to write some notes. On each of the pages, they do have annotations at the bottom. And it's a decent amount of annotations. I mean, if you're reading, these plays for some sort of class, you might want something more heavily annotated than this. But I felt it wasn't so heavily annotated that, because sometimes annotations can work against you if it's so heavily annotated, it's too much that you won't really use it. But I found it's like a good level of annotations. So there is an introduction. There's a publisher's note before each of these that are all the same in all of these editions. There is also a little breakdown of the theatrical world, which is the same in all the editions also. A little rundown of the texts of Shakespeare, and this is also the same in all of the editions and all of the different plays. And then there is an introduction that is specific to each of the plays, followed by a note on the text. And this covers the changes to the text from and the origins and what folios were used to compile this version of this text of each of Shakespeare's plays. So just wanted to let you know, because there's tons of different editions for Shakespeare. Another thing that I also picked up for my Shakespeare project was this Tony Tanner Prefaces to Shakespeare edition. I discovered Tony Tanner in a Penguin edition of Mansfield Park. Tony Tanner wrote the original preface to Mansfield Park in the original Penguin edition, and I really enjoyed his take on Mansfield Park. So I discovered that there was a bind up of all the prefaces that he wrote for Shakespeare. I jumped right on it and got it. So I haven't read all of his prefaces just yet, but they are very detailed, and I'll once I do get through all of them, I'll do a review of this. But anyways, so some honorable mentions of the Shakespeare plays that I did read this year that I really enjoyed was The Winter's Tale, Timon of Athens. Timon of Athens really struck me in while I was reading it. I really was struggling to grasp what was happening plot-wise. But then when I was finished reading it, I just sat there and thought about it for so long. So it really had a lot to chew on, and had some classic characters that we see in other histories. For example, Alcibiades is a character in this play. So interesting to have some historical figures in the play, which Shakespeare has done in lots of his plays, but I really enjoyed that. Much Ado About Nothing, The Merchant of Venice. This was possibly one of my favorite Shakespeare plays that I did read this year. I really enjoyed this, and it was so deep and it had so much to say. I highly recommend. And then also The Two Gentlemen of Verona. This also was one of my favorite Shakespeare plays that I read this year. So good. So much to chew on. Highly recommend. And then a quick genre shift. Honorable mention would be Marissa Mayer's Heartless. So this was so nostalgic for me because this, a fairy tale retelling, which Marissa Mayer is really well known for, the Queen of Hearts in Alice in Wonderland and her origin story. This was, as I said, so nostalgic because it just took you back to that weird, quirky world of Alice in Wonderland, and all the characters in there appear in this novel, and I thought it was so creative, and I really enjoyed Heartless. So good. And also my last honorable mention is going to be a sci-fi read, and this is going to be Chain of Grey by Jean Davis. And disclaimer, this is an author friend of mine. I do work with her on her novels, and she works on mine, and so I feel like I need to put that disclaimer in there. This is book 2 in her Narvan series, and it was just a punch in the gut. Main character goes through so much in this novel. It was at times a really difficult read, but it was such a good read at the same time. Jean, you did a great job in this one. Highly recommend. So good. All right, so with the honorable mentions out of the way, let's get into the top 10 books that I read this year. At number 10 is The Road by Cormac McCarthy. I really enjoyed this novel, and I really enjoyed reading Cormac McCarthy this year. I read 2 of his novels. I know The Road gets a lot of mixed reviews because it is such a sort of experimental stylistic choice that he took in writing this novel. I really enjoyed the struggle of the father in this story about keeping his son good in a world full of terrible people. And I think any parent can relate to that. And anyone who loves a child in their life can relate to that. Number 9, Epitaph of a Small Winter by Joaquim Maria Machado de Assis. I really enjoyed this novel. It was so modern for its time. I have a review on the channel for it. I'll link it down below if you are curious and want to find out more. This had so much to chew on, and I feel it's a book that I'm going to want to reread later on. And actually, I'm toying with the idea of buying a Portuguese language edition and working on my my Portuguese literacy, which I don't do near enough. So, Epitaph of a Small Winter, amazing. Coming in at number 8 is going to be Oliver Twist by Dickens. So this is a really beautiful old edition, illustrated edition that I found in an antique shop. And this year was the first year that I've read any Dickens. Oliver Twist was my favorite of Dickens that I did read this year. Your heart just breaks for Oliver in this, and Dickens did a wonderful job. It's a classic for a reason because it stood the test of time and it continues to do so. So I really, really enjoyed it. Number 7 is The Little Friend by Donna Tartt. I had some conflicted feelings to start with The Little Friend, and I did do a review on this book also, so I'll link it down below. Had quite a disappointing ending, but it really made me stop and think and assess and think about what this book was trying to say. Because it made me stop and think more deeply about it, I really discovered how rich the story was and really enjoyed reading it. And it's not going to be for everybody, and I'm sure lots of people will disagree with me, but I really enjoyed The Little Friend by Donna Tartt. This was another year, the first time I've read a Donna Tartt novel, and I ended up reading all 3 of her novels. So coming in at number 6 is The Goldfinch, and I'm going to do a review of this, and it's coming up. But I read through this, and I really enjoyed The Goldfinch. It was really hard to try to place what order I would rank Donna Tartt's novels. It was really hard. The Goldfinch was so different from her other 2 novels. It really came at the end in a much more positive and wrapped up manner than Tartt's novels tend to. And so it sort of surprised me. As I said, I'm going to do a review of this, getting into it a little bit deeper, but overall, I really enjoyed The Goldfinch, but it's not my favorite Donna Tartt. So now we're in the top 5. Number 5 is going to be The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I'm going to say is my favorite Donna Tartt novel so far. I really enjoyed The Secret History. The atmosphere, the plot, the characterization, I really enjoyed it. All of Donna Tartt's stories are sort of slow-moving, character-driven, and so that's not going to be for everybody, but I really enjoyed The Secret History. I did a review of this as well on my channel, so I'll link it down below if you're interested to watch. So good. And I find what is interesting in all of Donna Tartt's novels, they all start with a murder. All of them have started with a murder, and so I can't wait to see what she writes next, if she sticks with that trend in her writing. So Secret History, highly recommend. Coming in at number 4 is going to be Jane Austen's Mansfield Park. I also did a review of that. I'll link it down below. But this is my favorite Austen novel. I've read all of her finished works, and this is my favorite. Again, not for everybody. I feel like this is one of her polarizing novels. You either love it or you hate it. But I just liked how different of a female protagonist Fanny Price is. I loved the themes that Jane Austen explored in this novel. This sort of transition period for England is captured really well in this historical snapshot that we get in Mansfield Park. And I highly recommend, if you haven't picked it up and read it, to give it a read. Number 3 is going to be Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I loved this novel. It was amazing. There was so much to chew on. I did a review of this novel also. I'll link it down below if you're interested to watch. There's so much to unpack in Frankenstein. So many different ways you can look at it. And I can't believe it took me this long to finally read it, but I'm so glad that I did. It wasn't what I expected going in, because from knowing anything about Frankenstein, that the story is horror, it's gothic, it's, so I was much more ready for the creepy side of this story. What I didn't see coming was how deep and the motivations behind each character and what the central themes of Frankenstein were in the first place. I hadn't realized that, and so I absolutely loved Frankenstein. And coming in at number 2 is going to be Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. I also did a review of this on the channel. Absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. Like, there's so much to talk about in this novel. I mentioned in the review that quite some time ago I had read Wuthering Heights, and it made me swear off reading the Brontes for quite some time because I disliked it so much, and I'm so glad that after I finished reading all of Jane Austen, I told myself, well, now I have to work my way through the Bronte sisters. So this was the first novel that I'd picked up, and I'm so glad that I did because it has so much to say about the pursuit of happiness and purpose in life while going through the suffering and misery that comes inherently with existing in this world. Jane Eyre was so perceptive and ahead of her time, and again, it's a classic and has survived as long as it has for a reason, and highly recommend. So, number one, best read of the year, I will have to give it to Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. Now, this is not going to be for everyone. This is one of the most violent novels I have ever read. It's graphic in its description and cruel in its reality of life at the time that this was written. But it's based on a true story. A lot of the accounts of violence and situations that happened in this novel actually did happen and were taken from history. So it does not pull any punches. It is gruesome, but it's the truth. It's the reality of the time that this book was written. I also reviewed this novel as well on my channel, so I'll link that and all the other reviews that I've mentioned down below. This book really changed my perspective on reading in general. Like, the violence hits like a sledgehammer, but the themes of the novel are so nuanced and subtle, and there's so much metaphor in this novel that can be taken. This is another book that I'm gonna want to reread and dissect further and deeper, because I know that there's stuff that I've missed and that I need to hunt through and find and explore, because it was such a rich and well executed story. I highly recommend. But again, not for the squeamish. It was difficult to get through at times because of the amount of violence in it, but I highly recommend. This will change your reading game. That was my top 10, with some honorable mentions thrown in there. How was your reading year? What were the best books that you read this year? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like and subscribe so that more people can find some great books. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.